I wouldn't know. I'll leave that to the second half. We'll do this for the first half. Okay, good afternoon, good evening. Thank you very much for your patience while we discuss the details of what is a very comprehensive agenda for this evening, and one we want to get through correctly with the right process and without too much confusion. So thank you for your patience while we had some last minute discussions. I'd like to call the regular meeting of Council for Wednesday, September 6, 2017 to order. It's now 7:06 p.m. And the first item, of course, is adoption of the agenda, which we have and was circulated. And I would just ask if there are any, well, first a motion to adopt. Thank you, Councillor Lutz and Councillor Seegers. I saw Councillor Inkster. Any additions or deletions from staff or from council? Seeing none, all those in favor of adoption? That's carried. And we move to our first item, which is an appointment or delegation, a regular appointment in a sense, from our Community Forest Chair, who's going to present us with Q2 financial results, which we have in front of us. So welcome, Mr. Bonderud. Pleased to have you here. Pleased to see the results are much better than you might have. The guidance you gave us 6 months ago was thankfully not as dire as it is now.
Yeah, it was a pleasant surprise. No, I think when we first did the estimates and budget, that's back in 2015, which is almost 2 years ago now, and the world had changed a bit. And I think one thing we found out is the logging went on was that the quality of the logs was better than we had thought. The damage was superficial in some cases. So Dave made some decisions that were very beneficial to us in that respect. One thing I would like to note is that our volume was 30,000 cubic meters, that we will be probably ending up plus or minus a bit instead of the normal 20. And that was going to bring us up to our 2-year average of 20,000 a year. So even though you're seeing the 30 in the results, that's a year and a half results, not 1 year. So just so you know that. The value of the market was certainly picked up over the last year. When we had made those estimates back in 2015, the U.S. market was still bouncing along. Cedar has really picked up well, and it's probably the prices for the cedar are at an all-time high. The Douglas fir has been good. We have options there. It's not just the U.S. There's Australian, European options for the logs, so the demand for that has been good. And the hemlock, we have exported to China a fair amount. Not more than normal, but it certainly has saved us from some of the low-ball prices domestically. So put all that together, we came out with about $130 a cubic meter, and when we get the final amount of the sales, we'll be down to about 115. You know, the last little bit is always the hard part to sell. So, so 115 versus what we thought was going to happen, I think has certainly helped us tremendously. In the mix, probably we were about high 40-odd% of Douglas fir, 20-odd% of cedar, and about 30-odd% of the hemlock. So just so you've got an idea of how that works. Costs, they were in line. We didn't have any drastic surprises. Dave knew we were going to be paying extra because of the, I guess, the extra work that was involved, and to be some falling that wood would not go to market. It was just a cost thing, so that happened. But in terms of the actual cost forecast, there was no surprise there, so we were fairly on the market with that one. I think for the fall here, what we're going to be looking at is Dave is doing some deactivation of roads. There'll be some forward planning, some engineering, and we'll be wrapping up the final sales for it should all be wrapped up by the end of September, we hope, the final bits. So you'll see the end of the third quarter, we should have a definite picture of what the full burn cut was worth.
Interesting.
The one thing I'd like to say is that you've all got a folder now in your desks about our Wood Expo, September 16th. And again, that's the third year. Linda's done a tremendous job again. And there's going to be some new artisans there as well, not just the old a similar one. So there's something new there for everybody. And, I was sitting watching, thinking about the vital signs and, the economic activities on the coast. And certainly the forestry, including the pulp mill, is a major factor. The public sector with the health, the education is a major factor in the economy. Retail is a major factor. But when you add all the artisans and artists up and down the coast, I don't think there is a solid group feeling as to exactly how many there are. But the more we do it, and the more I've worked with some of the stuff with our art auction up in Pender, there are a lot, and they're all small business people. But if you put them together, I think they're a fairly significant economic factor on the coast. So please support the Wood Expo. It's worth the day. So with that, any questions?
Thank you. And I'll see if councillors do have any questions. And Councillor Mueller was first off the mark.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Bonderud. I was just going back over some of the previous financials, and I'm very happy to get these. But I had a question about your retained earnings for this year, because it's one of the highest, and the dividend is so far one of the lowest. So I'm just curious if there's a further dividend coming potentially for...
The April dividend was based on last year's results.
Okay.
And then next April, the dividend would be based on this year's results. So it's a time lag phase.
Okay, yeah. So the... Just to recap,
Yeah.
2015, you had a $1.5 million retained earnings, and in that year, there's a $500,000 plus dividend paid. 2016, you had 1.3 million of retained earnings and $225,000 dividend, and in this year, you have 1.9 million of retained earnings. Yeah. So how does that figure?
Well, I think when we talked last year, we weren't sure exactly how much, we were going to be making. In fact, the forecast was negative. So that's why you only got 200 last year, and then we weren't sure when we made the decision in Feb, March, what we were facing. So that was why you just had 100 in April. But yeah, I mean, given these results, if it continues to next year, it'll be a different phase. The dividend is paid on the audited statements for the year, not during the year. So February, March, we'll have the audited statements, and then the board will make the decision on the dividend.
Is it fair to say that it's tied to retained earnings in any way?
I wouldn't say retained earnings, but let's call it free cash flow after our costs. And we've done that before. We've done a free cash calculation based upon what we would need to go forward. I think we had this discussion maybe about a year ago, and I said we needed about 1.6. If you look at $80 a cubic meter times 20,000 cubic meters. So take your inference from that.
Yeah, okay, sure. It's just not clearly stated in the audited statements.
Oh, no.
That discussion that we had. So I mean, what's listed as retained earnings, right?
Yeah. No, the audited statement is strictly from the accounting. That's not part of our discussions.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you.
And it is true that retained earnings, in a sense, are your next year's free cash flow.
Yeah.
And I did ask at the AGM about your 10-year average for retained earnings, which is just over $1 million, not $1.6 million, but just over $1 million. So councillors can look, without counting chickens before they hatch, they can look at the retained earnings with some anticipation.
Yeah.
Exactly. Thank you for that. That's great. And I think Councillor Inkster was next.
Thanks, Glenn, for coming, and thanks for all the work that you guys do to run the community forest, but also create that dividend. And I'm looking forward to next year based on what you've presented this evening, and I do like your results better than your forecasts.
I do too.
I can say that, but I have to tell you that the times that you've come over the years, I would tease our finance officer about this, that it's like an accountant's approach. You always kind of warn us that there could be issues, and then you under-promise and over-deliver sometimes. I
learned that a long time ago.
Yeah, and so I'm happy with that, and I know the mayor likes to warn, don't count your chickens, but I will be counting the chickens, because I know that there's always some good ideas out there for community reinvestment that you can do. So I look forward to next year to work with you guys on that. The Wood Expo this weekend.
Next weekend.
Next
16th, yeah.
Oh, when is it?
16th.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I thought it was this weekend. Funny.
10 days from now.
See what happens when kids go back to school? It just gets blurry. So next weekend. It's Saturday, Sunday till 6? No?
Saturdays only,
Oh, Saturday, yeah.
10 to 5.
10 to
over in the
5.
Seaside, yeah.
Okay. And will the cars be there?
Jimmy gonna be there?
The
Yes.
cars will be there. They're a hit for kids of all ages. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay,
me
great.
too, yeah.
Okay. Do my best. Thanks. Thanks for coming.
Okay, we're getting more feedback than usual, so we're not sure why.
Maybe I'm too close to this.
I don't think so. They usually have these ones on, but we'll just watch it. And we'll make sure we only have one mic on at a time. Councillor Seegers.
Thank you. So given you've given us these results now, are your major expenses for the year paid out, or do you have some big
Most
major
of our
expenses
logging
coming?
is done, but we're going to be having deactivation costs and some engineering costs and everything. So the actual logging costs have been done. So I think there'll be more. So we'll see how it all works out at the end. But
Okay. And then you've indicated that you've done the recovery of the burn area, but I seem to recall that not all of the forest fire was in the community forest
that is correct.
tenure.
Yeah.
So do you know if the others around you have also done their recovery?
I do not know.
Okay.
Yeah. And we had two contractors there. The north side, that is 100% replanted. The south side, I think we're about 50% replanted. You got to wait for some wet weather before you do any more.
Okay. And then with regards to the Wood Expo, do you have a list of the artisans that are there? Do you post them on your website? Is there some way to get,
Should be
right, I know they're here,
Yeah.
but is there more information about how to get a hold of them after for people, or?
There's another flyer that we'll be handing out at the expo that has detailed biographies of all the participants and contact information.
All right, thank you very much.
Seeing no other questions, I thank you again for being here. We really do appreciate the work, and we appreciate the results as well. And the quarterly, it really helps, I think, inform the council as well as the public what's going on with the community forest when you do make the trip down from Madeira Park, Pender Harbor, Garden Bay, wherever. Garden Bay. And so we appreciate that as well.
Thank you. No, it's been a pleasant surprise to see the results, and it's one of those things that I'm really pleased about. And I know everybody would like to have reliability every year, but you never know what's going to happen. The softwood talks are still going on. Whether they get wrapped into the NAFTA, I don't know. So, got to wait and see. Anyway,
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Moving along to item 4, which is a proclamation regarding United Way Day. And I'll not read the entire proclamation, but I'll start with, whereas for 87 years, the United Way has collaborated with social service agencies, government, unions, universities, and advocacy groups to tackle key social issues affecting communities. And whereas through the generosity of donors and volunteers, United Way of the Lower Mainland builds communities and brings people together to create positive, lasting social change. And whereas a successful fall 2017 United Way of the Lower Mainland fundraising campaign will help vulnerable people in Sechelt and neighboring communities, now therefore I, Bruce Milne, do hereby proclaim that September 21st, 2017 shall be known as United Way Day in the district of Sechelt. And I would just confirm that the United Way of the Lower Mainland, for this purpose, the Lower Mainland includes Sechelt and the Sunshine Coast. So any donations that go to that larger group also end up being redirected and back into our community. Moving on to item 5, the adoption of minutes of previous council meetings. And the first is the brief afternoon meeting of Wednesday, August 2nd, motion to receive and adopt. Thank you, Councillor Seegers. Councillor Wright seconding. All those in favor? That's carried, and those are adopted. And the meetings of the regular meeting of Wednesday, August 2nd, 2017, a motion to receive and adopt. Councillor Lutz, Councillor Wright seconding. Any errors or omissions in those? Yes. Councillor Seegers?
Thank you. On page 12 of 19, I don't have a page number at the bottom. I noticed that my opposition to the motion for the biosolids disposal fee was recorded for 2 of the 3 readings. I'd like it recorded for the first one as well.
So that's page 22 of the agenda, page 12 of the minutes. Any other errors or omissions? Hearing none, with that amendment, motion to adopt. Oh, sorry, the motion's in front of us. All those in favor of adoption? That's carried. And business arising from the minutes. I had one which was on page 18 of something. Yeah, on the very last page of that agenda, page 28 of our agenda, was the council resolution to provide a letter of support for adoption of the bill regarding a national strategy for abandoned vessels. And I don't remember signing it in the last 2 weeks. So just want to draw attention to that. I don't have a great memory, but usually I can remember that. Any other business arising from those minutes? Seeing none, we move on to committee minutes and reports. And the first set of issues are the minutes of the Planning and Community Development meeting, pages 30 to 37 of our agenda. A motion to receive and adopt. Looking for the chair, but he's not paying attention. Councillor Seegers and Councillor Lutz. Second. All those in favor? Sorry. Okay, we'll look for errors and omissions first. Oh. Councillor Seegers?
Thank you. Page 34. I think this is just a autocorrect. In the bottom section, there's bullets. I think I'm on the right page. Say 34. In discussion, it was noted that second bullet, puppet should be there instead of Cupid.
Interesting. I've also marked up my copy because for some reason all the way through these minutes, there's an awful lot of spacing issues. And as long as other people are noticing it, so if staff picked it up, I don't have to. But. Any other errors? Then turning to the recommendations, are there any recommendations that need to be pulled out from that planning session? And if there are none, I will look then to a recommendation to receive and adopt recommendations 3 through 10, 3 through to 10. Thank you, Councillor Mueller. Councillor Lutz seconding. All those in favor? Thank you. That's carried, and the work of the Planning Committee has all been adopted. Minutes of the Committee of the Whole meeting for receipt. Councillor Seegers, thank you, and Councillor Lutz seconding. Any errors or omissions in that? All those in favor of receipt? Thank you, that's carried. And minutes of the Finance, Culture, and Economic Development meeting. This was a short meeting, pages 42 to 45. Again, a motion to receive. Councillor Wright and Councillor Seegers, second. Any errors or omissions? Any recommendations that need to be pulled out for specific discussion? And if not, I would look for a motion to adopt recommendations 3 on hydro beautification through to recommendation 10. Councillor Inkster. Councillor Seegers, second. All those in favor? And that's carried. I do encourage people to come to the afternoon committee meetings because that really is where all the discussion and talk and stuff. And if things go well at committees, then council can pretty much just adopt things at this stage. Or if there's specific issues that need further discussion, they will be opened up here, but for the most part, our work is quite routine and settled at committee stage. And finally, the minutes of the Integrated Community Sustainability Plan, and this is just for our information, so motion to receive, Councillor Seegers and Wright. And I won't ask for errors or omissions because it wasn't one of our own committees, so we may not actually know. And all those in favor, adoption, receipt, thank you. Now, business arising from any of those minutes. Sorry, I'm not following my own agenda. I had a whole bunch of question marks on the sustainability committee, so I thought I was going to get a chance to ask them, but I won't. We go directly to bylaws and item 8.1. And tonight we're bringing back 4 different development applications for various lands in the proximity to where we are here. Some for second and third readings, one for third reading, and they may take some discussion. The first is 8.1, which is public hearings and consultation for zoning bylaw number 25, 1987, and a motion to receive. Thank you, Councillor Seegers and Councillor Inkster. All those in favor? And with that, I would turn it to Mr. Thompson, Community Planner.
Yeah. Thank you, Your Worship. Again, this is the first of 4 public hearings, the results of such, which all happened in the same night around very similar issues. So bear with me as it is quite a bit of repetition while going through these next agenda items. So the first up is zoning bylaw number 25-283-2016, Clay and Family Lands Limited. This is the sorry, can I have some batteries? I think may have died. Yeah. This is the zoning bylaw to amend the zoning of lot 7 from R4 to R1. So that's actually a down zoning from. Sorry, trying to make things work. Oh, oops, I see a mistake. 1 second.
The best technology in the world still needs batteries and a source of power and a jump on it. Yeah.
And needs to be plugged in. Yes. So excuse me.
Do you have your cables so you can give it a jump start?
Yeah. So yes, this is the rezoning of lot 7 located here on Barnacle Street, as you can see, from R4 to R1. So a bit of the background, this is the one that was recently held on August 23rd, was the second public hearing that was a result of an issue of procedural fairness, which has previously been brought forward to council related to the impacts of a traffic impact study. Through here, I'm just going to go over a summary of the comments received to date. For this one, we are looking at the comments that were both at the most recent public hearing, at the first public hearing, and anything received written submissions by email or at the public hearings. So there's been support for the proposal. There's been concern of adequate water supply to support the proposal, concern over adequate sewer capacity, concern for potential blasting required for the development, concern with the content, timing, and methodology of the traffic impact study, concern of the lack of a safe pedestrian/cyclist connection between West Sechelt and the downtown, concern over the increase in traffic, concern over the cost of infrastructure improvements, desire to see the West Sechelt connector constructed prior to the opening of the Derby-Cowrie connector, concern over the widening Cowrie Street, concern over the restrictions of Barnacle Street and Pilot Way intersection to a right-in, right-out intersection as recommended by the traffic impact study, concern with increased light pollution, and a statement that the development would not result in significant increase to traffic. Just the base analysis is the traffic impact study, which is prepared by professional engineers, identifies the recommendation, identifies and recommends ways to mitigate these traffic impacts. So based off of, and the recommendation coming out of this analysis is that as long as the developer provides a proportionate share of the infrastructure needed to mitigate this traffic impact, then that traffic impact should be mitigated. As well as addressing some of the other concerns, is currently sufficient sewer capacity as per the urban systems report, which was done last year. That we did not receive any comments from the SCRD about water supply. The light pollution is mitigated versus our dark sky policy and how that's integrated into bylaw 430, requiring full cutoff light fixtures for our new light standards, and blasting is also controlled via bylaw 458. So kind of based on that initial analysis, the recommendations are, of course, that the minutes of the public hearing be received, and that council confirms that consultation with persons, organizations, and authorities for this bylaw is now concluded, and that prior to the adoption of this proposed zoning bylaw, that the servicing requirements identified in the RF Binney and Associates report are secured based on a proportionate share of traffic generated. And then finally, that the zoning bylaw number 25, amendment bylaw number 25-283, 2016, Claim Family Lands Limited, be given second and third reading, as it is consistent with the OCP, and really the servicing was the big kind of hold up with the traffic impact study. Thank you.
Thank you very much. If we could have somebody move recommendations 2 and 3, they're both quite straightforward. Councillor Seegers, Councillor Lutz. That's the minutes that are being adopted and the closure of the public hearing. All those in favor? That's carried. And recommendation 4 is regarding the infrastructure and servicing requirements. Somebody to move that. Thank you, Councillor Seegers, Councillor Wright. Any discussion on that item? So I have a question then. It might generate discussion, but it might not. On page 3 of your report, page 51 of our agenda, in the second full paragraph, you have a long sentence at the end, 2 sentences actually, but the long sentence at the end, which is more or less the basis of item 4, recommendation 4. To ensure that these recommendations are completed, it is recommended that prior to adoption of the zoning bylaw amendment, that a development agreement is registered on title to secure the infrastructure upgrades on a proportionate basis. So that begs the question, do we know exactly what the infrastructure upgrades are? And will they be everything that's identified in the Binney report? And if not, how would that be adjusted? And then the follow-up will be, do we know what the proportionate basis model is at the moment or not?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. So the recommendations to look, of course, at the kind of like the whole of the West Sechelt developments. So we'd be looking at doing a proportionate share based on the cost of providing all those developments and based off the traffic generated by each of the individual parcels. This subject law is looking at 7 lots, which is a relatively small portion of the greater whole of units. So we'd be looking at, probably with this development, having the development agreement, essentially it's kind of like the easiest way to think of it would be like a front-ended development cost charge that you could then look at the kind of a proportionate share, and then getting a cash contribution for design work and the eventual construction.
Okay, so that explains the proportionate basis that you'll probably use. Do we know what the infrastructure upgrades will be? Because we want that amendment prior to adoption. So registered on title to secure the infrastructure upgrades. So the question, I guess, is, are those the upgrades 100% of what Binney has suggested, or is there still some discussion or discretion on the Binney report, on the upgrades recommended? And it may be not you that answers this, I don't know.
I would kind of go with the traffic engineer's recommendations.
Okay.
The only item that's kind of additional onto that is related to some of the other developments from Clay and Family Lands, in which we'd also be looking at securing some land for dedication. And that's based off public concern and staff recommendation.
So we may want to revisit that sentence in future reports, because that sentence I read out is in each of the next 4 reports.
Okay.
So I was hoping to understand it this time, so, okay.
Yes.
Thank you. Any further discussion or questions by council? If not, I'll look for all those in favor of recommendations 3 and 4. And that's carried. Any opposed? No. And somebody to move recommendation 5, which is that we go to second and third reading. Councillor Seegers, Councillor Wright, make that motion. Any discussion of that? All those in favor? Any opposed? I see no opposed, so that's carried. And we will then move to actually do that second and third reading. Bylaw number 25283, 2016, Clayton Family Lands Limited, which is a bylaw to amend District of Sechelt zoning bylaw number 25, 1987 by rezoning a property in the West Sechelt neighborhood from R4 to R1. And second reading is moved forward by Councillor Seegers, Councillor Wright. Any discussion at second reading? All those in favor? That's carried. And third reading is moved forward by Councillor Shanks and Councillor Wright. Any discussion at third reading? I won't allow amendments anyways, but discussion. All those in favor? That's carried. Amendments are for second reading, so we don't get too far down. Moving then to item 8.2, which is public hearings and zoning bylaw number 25 for another section of Clayton Family Lands Limited. First, a motion to receive. Councillor Wright, Councillor Shanks. All those in favor? That's carried, and I turn back to Mr. Thompson. You don't have to repeat all the ones that are the same, but some if you want.
Yes. Thank you, Your Worship. Getting on to the next. So this is this report is for zoning bylaw number 25269, 2016, Clay and Family Lands Limited. This is the zoning bylaw amendment dealing with phase 2A of the Trail Bay Estates. You can see it here. Here's Clayton Avenue, and here's Cowrie Street. This again this was the third public hearing for this file. The third public hearing was triggered by the issue of procedural fairness. The second public hearing was triggered by a request from the developer to amend some of the community amenity contributions and how that could affect the application. So here is a summary of the comments. Again, a lot of this is repeated. There were, of course, concerns with the traffic impact study related to the timing and the methodology, and how some numbers are included or excluded. Again, concern over the desire to see safe pedestrian and cyclist access, that wanting to see the proposed West Sechelt connector constructed and having that constructed prior to opening up the Derby-Cowrie connection. Opposition to the development based off of the existing problems with the Phase 1 Trail Bay Estates. Concern over the traffic. So there's been submissions of overviews of the projects. Recommendation that to revise the district's adaptable and accessible housing policy. Opinion that the proposed development would have a negligible impact on the local traffic, and then a recommendation to consider the independence of studies conducted by the proponent. Again, the analysis is quite similar to the previous one. The traffic impact study was conducted by professional engineers with their recommendations attached, and that the impacts of the traffic can be mitigated through providing this share of the new infrastructure. What is different is the securing of the dedication of the West Sechelt connector. A lot of the public comments were received, did talk about having this connector in place. At least some of it wanted to see it done. Some wanted to see it done before the Cowrie Derby connection. But it was a recurring theme through the comments. It also does, of course, make planning sense to ask for this connector at the earliest stage possible, as we can then plan to have this connector regardless of private development of the property, which can of course be subject to a whole slew of market conditions. So by securing this this dedication for the Neptune Derby connector, it would greatly, it would also provide a chance for us to look at alternative funding methods besides developer contributions, such as through adding it to our DCC program. So it does seem like the best solution and best requirement to have going forward. So the recommendations again are receiving the minutes, confirming that the consultation is now complete, and then that prior to the adoption of this bylaw amendment, that the servicing requirements are again secured based on the proportionate share of the traffic generated, and that a road dedication for the Neptune Derby Road extension within this subject property is also secured. And then finally, that the zoning bylaw amendment be given third reading. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. And I'll look again if council wants any clarifications of any part of the report. Councillor Inkster.
Thank you. No clarification really. We've done a lot of work on this and it's good information here, but I'm glad that they're securing the connector roads and the connector connectivity. However that ends up, because we need to have some alternatives for travel from the downtown to West Sechelt other than along the highway. So I'm glad to see that.
Okay, and I have Councillor Mueller.
Yes, thank you. I wanted to ask a little bit about the servicing requirements identified in the RF Binney Associates report, as that formed a large part of the comment that we received at the public hearing. Specifically, what is the stage that we are at with MOTI regarding the Shorncliffe intersection upgrades? And I'm just going to go through the list of recommendations here so I can understand, be sure that I understand how these recommendations are going to be implemented.
Sorry, just the Shorncliffe one. We have met with MOTI to discuss that, and I believe that's something that our engineering department is also going to be following up. Of course, it is mostly on MOTI jurisdiction, so but we have talked to them about a signalized intersection at that location.
Are they resisting any of our suggestions, or did they have concerns with the Binney report?
No.
Not that you're aware of.
No.
Thank you.
And just to follow up to that one, it's indicated in this report that by 2035 horizon that light would be built. However, we've heard from many of the residents that currently it's not adequate. So perhaps we can include that in those discussions. And then the second one is the bike lanes that are recommended to be built on Barnacle Street in particular, and for that street to be widened. Where in our Sechelt bylaws is that indicated that that would be required?
That's a recommendation from the Binney traffic engineers. That is, of course, by improving alternate modes of transportation, you can reduce the demand on car-oriented transportation, and which, of course, will take less infrastructure. So by providing better pedestrian cyclists is just as a method of traffic reduction. It is also within our bylaws, which I'm not quite certain if those are the same standards that were when that initial road was constructed. It may have been different standards. So.
Yeah, okay. I mean, I think most of us would understand why that's required on Cowrie with the school up there and the amount of traffic on Cowrie as per this plan. However, on Barnacle, we're not expected to see that quite amount of bike traffic. And I'm just wondering if that's an oversight that we've dealt with.
It's a fairly standard requirement now in our current standards. Yeah, not quite sure if there's anything else to add to that.
So it's specifically stated that on roads such as Barnacle, that there would be bike lanes on both sides. That's indicated in our bylaws.
I would have to confirm with bylaw 430.
Okay.
So.
Yeah, it seems a bit much to me in that particular location. I do understand the need for a wide number of measures to be taken when there's that amount of density put into the area. There's no question. Some of these things really make a lot of sense, and I do understand the frustrations of the residents there to changes. I'm happy with most of what I see. Another one of the recommendations was for to incorporate traffic calming design elements into the overall development roadwork. Is that something that has been considered up until now?
There is, of course, at the time of subdivision, there are some traffic design elements that the approving officer can consider. And we do have those provisions in bylaw 430, such as, curb bulging, elevated crosswalks. Those are some of the more soft looking at traffic calming measures. You could also look at reducing the road width to reduce speeds. And there are different measures that can be integrated mostly at the time of subdivision.
Okay, yeah, I think we need to perhaps define those a little better. There were a lot of concerns raised at the public hearing from those living on Cowrie Street beyond Trailbay Estates and Clayton Family Lands. And perhaps that's a kind of measure that could be used to mitigate some of those concerns. They don't want that to be used as a connector road through the neighborhood. We understand that. We know that we're building the Derby connector to Neptune at some point in the future, and perhaps that's an interim measure that we could use. Thanks.
Thank you for that, Councillor Mueller. And if there's no other questions, I do have a question about the West Sechelt connector and the addition of that program to the development cost charges. How, and this is probably for the Director of Corporate and Financial Services, how long would it actually take for us once we decide to ask for that service dedication to actually add it to the DCCs so that future developments contributed to the DCC connector or to the Neptune connector?
Thank you, Your Worship. As long as the construction fell within the 20-year horizon of the next DCC bylaw, it would be added at that time.
So 2037. So whenever we review and revise the DCC bylaw, and we said we would do that within 2 years of adopting the last one, and that was about 6 months ago.
Yes, yeah, the goal would be middle of next year to bring something forward for 2019 adoption.
For 2019 adoption. Because if we're going to do that, it's really important to actually do it, actually get it into the DCCs. So one developer doesn't have to pay for all of it. And so the broader community that's going to use that, it also puts it on the books so that we can start to put it into our 5 or 10 year plan. It's the most important. So I'm very much supportive of getting the West Sechelt connector started. I'm very much in support of the DCCs, but I've watched government not do things as often as I've watched them do things. Any other, Councillor Shanks?
Yes, Your Worship. I'm not sure if you're wanting to deal with recommendations 2 through to 5 as one group, or you were going to do 2 and 3 and then 4 and 5. But I'll just make my comments now, I think. The Neptune Derby Road connector is an interesting situation. And I realize it pertains to this specific property, but approximately 5 years ago, and Councillor Inkster will remember this, the Neptune connector was a fairly big issue with people on the lower end of Neptune and that surrounding neighborhood, to the point where the recommendation was made and endorsed by the council at that time that the Neptune connector heading east would not be put in place until such time as the dedicated highway along the right-of-way was available for construction. In other words, the Neptune connector would no longer go down Neptune Road from where it comes off of the hillside down to trail, but the Neptune connector would not actually take place until such time as where the dedicated highway was going to be was in fact going to take place. And the dedicated highway is in fact along the hydro right of way. So albeit that we can address this specific to that property, it'll be a Neptune connector that doesn't go anywhere unless we resolve the other issue. And having said that, because this seems to be one of the major issues that is impacted by the traffic impact study, and we've heard a lot of comments from the public about it, I would just like to have the opportunity of seeing an overall map of this development and adjacent developments and be more familiar with exactly where those roads are going to go, so that I have a better idea in terms of how I feel they will impact current development and future development. So that's my suggestion, that sometime in the near future we have the opportunity to see a map, to see that, physically see that connection, rather than reading about it and not maybe fully understanding it.
Okay. Just to follow up on those comments, I'm not sure if they're shared by other councillors. Probably to some degree they are, because we all want to know more about it. Is that sufficient for you to be reluctant to make an informed decision on what's in front of you, or do you think it?
I can do it with recommendations 2 and 3, but
we'll go through and see what happens.
Yeah,
then.
fine.
Okay. Because I don't want councillors not to make informed decisions, but I do want to make sure that we have to know what we're deciding. On the same time, we've taken quite a while on this, so we want to see how that goes. I want to process the information that you, Councillor Shanks, just provided, that there is a council resolution on record which in fact halts or redefines the Neptune connector until such time as it's integrated with the road right-of-way for a proposed highway, the bypass, which doesn't mean the bypass has to be developed, but the road access and right-of-way would have to be accepted, and we would build Neptune on that right-of-way, which means serious discussions with Moti, and I'd like the corporate officer in the next few hours, like 3 or 4 days. Tell us if I'd like to see that resolution. It'd be interesting to see the depth. And yeah. Okay, and I'll just turn to staff for a minute and then back to Councillor Inkster. Ms. Letman.
Just for clarification, the direction and the location of the connector has been in the official community plan for a very long time, on the map since 2010. And there was that discussion around that. There is I don't believe we'll get anything from BC Hydro, but there is the mechanism was to connect into other roads at the bottom of the hill.
But do you think there was a council resolution saying not to do the Neptune
I know which project it came up, the discussion came up in, so I'll help the corporate officer find that, but I don't recall the exact motion.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so we know something happened, and we know council made a decision, but it was a long time ago. Councillor Inkster? Yeah. 2011 to 2012.
Yeah, I guess Councillor Shanks has looked at minutes to pin it down to the time. You remember? Good memory, Councillor Shanks. We've talked about other things, and you've said, I don't remember, so that was good in that case. I thought it was 2010. And that was actually in reference to a development that's just up the hill that would be adjacent to the Spain proposal. So if you look at the Spain proposal on a map, it was the development to the right of that, and basically the same elevation. And interestingly enough, it was a rectangular lot, much like the Spainy development, so you could envision it being the next lot over, and that was the road that was proposed to access that development. So, and there was opposition to it at the time. I'm not sure where. There's a number of people that were concerned at the time that don't live here. Some still do. So I don't know where that's at, but it was in reference to also in terms of the angle by which the road would access that development. It would be quite steep, but it was about 100 to 200 meters of road that there was an opposition to. So I'm not sure what the concern would be further up in terms of road connection to then connect up to West Sechelt.
I'm wondering if this will impact the recommendation 4, but let's see if there's any other discussion of the report. And if not, I'll look then for a motion to adopt recommendations 2 and 3, which are on the public hearing and the consultation. Councillor Seegers, Councillor Wright, all those in favor? That's carried. And then we move to recommendation 4, which is the prior to adoption of zoning bylaw, servicing requirements and road dedication. I have somebody to move that motion. Thank you, Councillor Seegers and Councillor Mueller. Now, we want to be careful if we move forward on this appropriately and then come back and find that there's other plans that were put in place where we won't need, will we need this road dedication because it's further west than the development that Councillor Shanks and Councillor Inkster are talking about? Is that your sense as well from the planning department?
We'll look back at that motion, but I'm virtually certain that in terms of the engineering department and their views, that we do need that dedication. It will connect not only to the downtown, but the adjacent lands as well.
Okay. Thank you for that, and thank you for the institutional history that is still retained. Well, Joanne's been here for a while too, but it's important. Councillor Seegers.
Thank you. I'm going to speak in favor of the road dedication. If we do not secure it at this point, and we do need it down the road, we'll have missed the boat. So I'd rather we go ahead with securing that at this point so that we have it for the potential expansion.
Thank you for that, Council. Any further discussion? Councillor Mueller?
Yeah, I just wanted to add my voice to the comments made by Councillor Seegers. I'm comfortable that that these types of accesses through West Sechelt and through into those neighborhoods can be built with the neighborhood integrity remaining. And so we need to prepare for a time in the future when Sechelt has a lot more residents, and we need to, of course, prepare to have those transportation thoroughfares in the future.
Thank you. And Councillor Shanks?
Don't misunderstand me. I'm not against taking the road dedication within this development. I'm just pointing out that further east, there could be an issue. And I'd still like to see an overall map that addresses the recommendations of this latest report, traffic impact study report that we've received.
Yes,
thank you.
We'll follow up on a clarification and mapping of the Binney recommendations. And Councillor Inkster had mentioned that some of the residents who were opposed to the east portion of Neptune have moved away or passed on, but Betty Ann Papp still lives there. And she's a force to be reckoned with. And I know she was deeply opposed to it at the time, now that you've refreshed my memory. So let me put that on the record. YouTube, Betty Ann, if you're watching, we know. Any further discussion of the motion on the floor, which is on the servicing requirements and the road dedication? Seeing none, I'll ask for all those in favor. Any opposed? That's carried. Thank you very much. And then we look for the final motion that the zoning bylaw be given third reading. Councillor Wright, Councillor Seegers second. All those in favor? That's carried.
That's based on clarification that we will have a map showing those.
We will have a map for council and probably a mini workshop on the Binney report to make sure that
Thank you very much.
we can ask all our questions.
Thank you very much, Your Worship.
Yeah, we did ask for that in July, but August being the kind of month it wasn't possible to do it with vacations. So we'll try and do that in September. though some councillors are going away in September. So moving then to the bylaw, which is bylaw number 25269, 2016, Clayton Family Lands Limited, a bylaw to amend District of Sechelt zoning bylaw number 25, 1987 by rezoning a property located in District Lot 1385 from RR1, Rural Residential 1, to R1, Residential 1. And I'm looking for a motion for third reading. Councillor Seegers, Councillor Wright. Now, on the bylaw, if the corporate officer could look at it, we brought this forward for third reading. The bylaw in front of us said that second and third readings were rescinded in March, which strikes me as closer to what we probably did because we'd want to take it back to first reading to take it to public hearing. So I think we should be making a motion first for second reading to be sure it's done, and then third reading. So if we can just procedurally back up a step, I'd ask if Councillor Seegers would move second reading and Councillor Wright second reading. Any discussion at second reading of bylaw number 25269? All those in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. And third reading of bylaw number 25269 is moved by the same two, Councillor Seegers and Councillor Wright. All those in favor of third reading? Any opposed to third reading? That's carried. One small procedural step at a time. Item 8.3, public hearings and consultation for zoning bylaw number 25, 1987, which is the Westbrook by the Sea project. First, a motion to receive the report. Councillor Wright and Councillor Seegers. All those in favor? And I'll turn it back to Mr. Thompson, our community planner.
Thank you, Your Worship. Again, yeah, this is the zoning bylaw amendment for the Westbrook by the Sea project, CD 37. This is the location, again, just immediately to the west of the previous report. You can see here is CD 37. Okay, here's Clayton Park, the proposed expansion to Clayton Park, Clayton Avenue, and Cowrie Street. The recent public hearing on August 23rd was the fourth public hearing held for this project. There's also previous reports analyzing all the public comment received up to from the beginning of the project up to the adjournment of the third public hearing. That report was quite long, quite detailed, so it was only linked within this report and is available, of course, for the public to view during normal business hours. The purpose of both this report and this presentation will be focusing on the public comments received between the adjournment of the third public hearing and the adjournment of the fourth public hearing, as everything previous has already been analyzed and presented to council. Here's the summary of the comments. Again, are quite some of it is quite repetitious from the previous presentations, but there is concern over the location of the proposed development, concern of the height and the massing of the proposed development, concern over noise, concern with the impact on the community's character, the concern over the increase in traffic, concern with access for people with mobility issues related to, I guess, the location, recommendation that the infrastructure should be completed prior to the approval of the development, concern over on-street parking in the area, concern over intersections and how they are managed, concern that there has been no concessions on the party of the developer, and concern over the recommended restrictions of the Barnacle Street Pilot Way intersection, concern over the Cowrie Street connection to Derby Street prior to the construction of the West Sechelt connector, concern over the contents and methodology of the traffic impact study, some of the concern over the cost of the infrastructure improvements. There was a recommendation to actually look at splitting the traffic with a physical barrier, separating eastward and westward traffic along the Cowrie Street Derby Road connection. There was a request to extend the development cost charge grace period, a request to have the development agreement a condition of final adoption, and that the district works with the applicant. Again, concern over the lack of pedestrian and cyclist connections between downtown and West Sechelt. Concern over the lack of maintenance of street trees planted in development based on the existing developments. Concern over the official community plan being ignored. Concern over the lack of social license, and concern over the future maintenance costs assumed by the district related to this development. Again, the analysis is quite the same for the traffic impact study. We'll be looking at mitigating the impacts through providing these additional services. This is one of the larger developments, that larger share of the developments related to the study, so it may actually have, say, some infrastructure improvements directly related to it instead of, say, a cash contribution, and that will still be to be determined. And as previously in the previous presentation, the securing of the dedication for the West Sechelt connector is also crucial to abate public concerns. We can also perhaps show the basic location of it. So the Sechelt connector actually be just to the north here, kind of diagonally, and then we connect down to Neptune, of course, to the east. But it would be about maybe 50 to 100 meters just north of this project is where that connector would go across east to west. It would, I believe it would be currently unnamed, but it's planned in the official community plan as kind of the Derby, Tyler, Neptune connector, or the West Sechelt connector. But
It's probably Tyler then.
yeah, that may be the more accurate name, but it would be currently unnamed. Getting back. And then a lot of the analysis remains the same from the previous report. Those concerns brought up with the height of the massing. This was the proposal that was brought forward by the applicant, and they're looking at having the proposal as is for the project feasibility, based off of the kind of recommendations, of course, coming from that previous report, have carried forward with the addition of the mitigation methods through the requiring of the servicing requirements. So going again, just go through the recommendations from the start. The recommendation is to, of course, to receive and adopt the minutes of the public hearing, to confirm that consultation again has been completed for the zoning bylaw amendment, and then as with the previous report, that the servicing requirements be secured, and that the road dedication also be secured for that Tyler, Neptune, Derby connection. And then there is taken again from the previous report that there are two recommended options, that either the application for the official community plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment for Westbrook Place proposal be denied, and that is looking at the recommended option for if you're looking at the long-term strategic plan and the official community plan for the area. Or there's the option of that the zoning bylaw continue again and be given third reading, and that is based off the recommendation of the short-term gains and the community amenities provided with this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll move then first to have council move recommendations 2 and 3 on the minutes and the consultation process. Councillor Seegers, Councillor Lutz, second. Any discussion? All those in favor? That's carried. And then recommendation number 4, which is again the servicing requirements and the road dedication, moved by Councillor Wright and Councillor Seegers seconding that. And any discussion of that item? Councillor Shanks again.
Your Worship, I'm not sure on the basis of what we actually have here, whether that would impact B portion of recommendation number 4. if it does not in fact say Tyler, Neptune, Derby Road connection. Because it would appear to be quite different than the previous rezoning that we had under 8.2, where Tyler Road would appear to be an integral part.
8.2, the recommendation was secured for the portion of Neptune Derby Road extension.
Yeah.
And this one uses exactly the same language.
Yeah.
And you're thinking it should add Tyler?
Well, I believe so, because
both
it's
of
now
them?
been pointed out to us that it hadn't been pointed out before in the previous one. They just mentioned Derby Road, Neptune Derby connection.
I think that if planning has this mapped, the names don't matter because the names, it is unnamed and it would eventually become Tyler. But could we go back to that map where you pointed out where the connector would be? And perhaps Councillor Inkster and Shanks could help me understand this. I heard some talk, but I couldn't understand what it was.
That's why I'm referencing the fact that a map of the overall area would help clarify these 2 or 3 specific connectors,
Yeah.
Derby, Neptune, and Tyler. Yet unnamed specifically in this diagram.
Right. Though it's kind of hard to show on this map as the area is actually not included. It would be Neptune Road would probably go directly to the north of here if you were to kind of consider it. The issue is, of course, is the roads aren't straight on this area as they are, grades and everything here. So if you were looking diagonally from east to west, Neptune would come down at maybe a 30-degree angle off of its current trajectory, then turn about 30 degrees as it crosses across the, going up the hill, and it crosses the Clayton family lands. Immediately adjacent to the Clayton family lands to the west is where it would then intersect with Derby. And then it kind of would then curve up to meet in with how Tyler connects. This is referenced in the official community plan, but it would, of course, be an unnamed road. We could look at changing the language to remove the naming and just require a 20-meter road dedication or another language to satisfy those conditions.
Yeah. Well, I'm asking for, I think, an overall map and showing this development and the other 2 developments will clearly show us that. The connection between Derby and Neptune and the unnamed portion of this particular development to be set aside as road dedication. An overall map will clearly show us that. And I think we'll then have a better understanding of what that means. That's all I'm asking for.
And so would you be able to make an informed decision on this if we just simply asked for a dedication of a portion of the road extension unnamed, or do you actually want to see the map before you can feel informed that it's needed?
I would dearly like to see the map, and I think we'd all be better informed.
Okay, and Councillor Inkster, I saw you wanting to comment on this a minute ago. Can you help us on this from your history?
Well, the difficulty was in the why I sort of whispered to you really quickly there is that I was looking perhaps to you to ask staff for more clarity on how the road will look as it proceeds to West Sechelt and where it will connect up and what it will become. The problem is the communication, the expectation of what this road will become and look like as it moves to West Sechelt. Previously, and in the previous proposals and if we pass the previous development, the road is quite clear how that will come about. We know where that's going to go. But once we do this piece that's on the far end of this development, it becomes unclear to people how that will look and what that will become. And in the end, the people that live there and in West Sechelt aren't sure what size of road it is, what traffic is expected, whether there will be bike traffic on that road. It just becomes more confusing to them. They know, they've talked to and they've spoken to in the public hearing about the previous road. We've heard that, but nobody has had any information and or has spoken to this particular second road yet. So it becomes a problem in terms of information available to the people using that road, and also the people in Upper West Sechelt.
And I'm hearing concern about making a determination without that information. Yeah. I'm going to go to staff next, if you don't mind. Thank you, Angela. Ms. Letman.
I'd like to make a suggestion that we could bring forward a staff report on that connector and show you the maps, show you the progress, that's the idea that's been developed, and bring that forward, and then also locate the developments that are there. Again, it is in the official community plan. We're trying to pull up the map now, so we may have it within a few minutes. I can perhaps help Connie over here do it.
Okay, we're going to give staff a moment to see if they can actually find it. I'm not sure if that'll help. The only other, some of us are comfortable with staff's recommendation to secure a road dedication. Some people want more information. I think the only, we'll wait for a few minutes to see if they can find it. Otherwise, we'll see if somebody simply wants a motion to table until we have further information. That's what I'm hearing from councillors that are speaking. That's what I think. I don't think because they won't until it's built. Okay, do councillors want to speak on this issue while we're here? Councillor Mueller?
Yes, thank you. The way I read recommendation number 4 is that it'll be prior to adoption. There's A and B there. We're hearing that we want to know a little bit more, some councillors, about option B. And I tend to agree that we should at least have a firm idea of what that is. If it's gonna be secured by some legal means, we should at least know where it is. And then the servicing requirements identified in the Binney Associates report, there is a gray area there. And certain citizens at the public hearings have asked us to clearly delineate what those gray areas are and come to some more clarity. So I would be in favor of that. We know we're not adopting them tonight. We have one more opportunity before we get to 4th reading to really bring that forward. And I would expect at that point that we have a fulsome discussion at 4th reading, which normally we do not have.
No, normally 3rd reading is a pretty strong signal to the developer to get the shovels out and get started and make sure all the engineering reports are done. And so adoption is a formality long after financing is in place. So I think we want to be prudent here on all sides. Is it possible to find that in the OCP? Because it is part of a transportation study. My own take just on this part of the issue is that staff's recommendation for a road dedication is sufficient. How it actually looks, because there's a number of options, and how it'll actually be designed is something that none of us will know in advance. You'll just know that there's a general option in that portion of Sechelt. But I don't want councillors to feel railroaded or voting without confidence in their ability to make a decision. Yep. Or you could tell us where the link is, and we can all go to our smartphones and we'll pull it out, and everyone in the audience can look at it at the same time. Some people have already got it. So, and you know, you couldn't do this 10 years ago, probably not even 5 or 6 years ago. It's amazing. Okay.
Thank you, Your
Mr. Thompson.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. So here you can see Neptune Road. It then goes down here to connect over to Derby Road, and it curls up here to go to Tyler Road. So the section we'll be looking at dedication is this portion right here. With this proposal.
With this proposal, it's at the top end of that block. You might just show us the block again, yeah?
Here.
Where the hydro line veers off or comes south.
The hydro line's right here.
Okay,
This is the SCRD water line.
okay, so the water line, and then it would be the portion of the road, roughly speaking, just above that. Unnamed, but at the moment it's closer to Neptune than anything.
Yes, I'd say.
And this is on the far north of that particular parcel, and it's above what we're actually rezoning tonight.
Yes. Here, if you were looking at, here's the subject parcel of the Westbrook facility. Right here, you can see Clayton Park. So it would be located to the north of this, probably about 100, maybe about 100 meters to the north.
So you're saying that Tyler Road's on the up there and then coming down?
No,
So,
oh, sorry.
yeah, this is Tyler over here. And then it curves down.
That's what I'm saying.
Okay. Yeah, that's Tyler. Well, it's also Neptune on the south end. So it doesn't have a name, it's just an unnamed road dedication. We'll rename the whole thing when it's done, probably the Shanks Connector. It's a freeway, only for custom cars, only for custom cars. Yeah, and that's a good thing that it's a long time because we can only do our naming post. Well, it's in our policy. We don't name after living people, especially living politicians. We wait until they're deceased. So, okay, does that help in a sense in terms of where we're going just on item motion that's in front of us, which is prior to adoption, the servicing requirements and the road dedication? And the arguments made by two councillors on my left and right was that we need the road dedication now because if we don't take it now, then it'll be much more difficult in the future. Or we start to get it now because there's still some zoning just between the Westbrook and there, so but it's part of a parcel. Any further discussion of the motion or concerns about deferring it? Councillor Mueller.
Do we want to have any staff comment on some of the more nitty-gritty aspects of the requirements identified in the BINI? Do we want to do that now, or?
4A, the servicing requirements identified, that has been a point of contention both with developers' representatives, some members of the community, and some members of council wondering just what that list of requirements will be. Is there a way of encapsulating that or referring us to the binning report or to telling us what they will be?
Those requirements are identified clearly in the BINI report. The cost, however, is not. And we'd be looking at getting the engineering done to determine the cost estimate so that we can have that proportionate share of that cost in the development agreements moving forward.
And they're scattered through the binning report. It's not summarized in any particular spot.
I believe it's mainly in the conclusion recommendations.
Okay.
So, and that includes some of those more generic requirements of traffic calming measures and everything, as well as those requirements looking at the widening of specifically, say, Pilot Way and Barnacle Street that way, and the signalization of Shorncliffe.
And those will be brought forward in some detail before final adoption?
Yes, any development agreement will come forward to council for your endorsement.
Okay, so we may not vote on adoption, but we will vote and discuss the development agreement.
Correct.
Okay. If there's no further discussion, I'm going to call a question that's before us, that prior to adoption of zoning bylaw number 25, 1987, A, servicing requirements identified are secured, and B, the road dedication be secured. All those in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. Now, we have a final option, which actually is two recommended options, and I would have people look at it either be denied or given third reading, and I'll look to council or a councillor to move one of those. Councillor Seegers.
I'll move recommendation number 6.
That zoning bylaw number 25, 1987, amendment bylaw number 25, 278, Westbrook by the Sea be given third reading. Seconded by Councillor Wright. And discussion. Councillor Lutz, and I'll put myself on the list for discussion as well.
I'm going to vote against this recommendation. After our public hearing and the discussions that took place, I have some concerns around the massing and the height. I also have some concerns around the public dedications or amenities. So I'm going to vote against this recommendation.
Any further discussion? Councillor Mueller.
Yeah, this is one of the largest developments, of course, that we've gotten this far upon. Previously, when we got to third reading on this development, I said that I supported it, and I said that because of the dire need for seniors housing and seniors housing options on the Sunshine Coast. I am aware of some of the other issues related to the planning of this site. I have heard the residents with regards to their concerns about how they feel they've been treated by the developer. So that is it's in the back of my mind. And but first and foremost is this issue that we have of our aging population, and to me that carries a weight that is more than the others. And it's not to say that those haven't been thought about. They have. I am concerned as moving forward as the rest of this parcel gets developed, that the neighbors and their concerns are heard. They don't feel heard by this developer, and that's going to become an issue of contention. I can see it coming.
I'll speak to my concerns if that's okay. Like many councillors, I spent the long weekend reading this fat agenda and struggling with the issue. I've come to the conclusion that the Westbrook by the Sea is the right project at the right time in the wrong place. I spent more than 2 trips up to the bluffs, starting both times at the bottom, down here by the Municipal Hall, just to see how long it would take me and how my heart stood. And it was a great cardio. I think we should all add it in. It's not something that most people will be doing very often. I think it took me 6 minutes, and I was pretty glad there was a place to stop at the top of the bluff when I got there. But my main concern is that when it came through last time, I supported it largely because we have a strong need for assisted living on the Sunshine Coast. I was supported in that by the change in parkland dedication, which I thought was a major improvement and concession that was developed by our previous director of planning, and I wanted to support that. And I was quite supportive by the operator, supportive of the operator when he came to speak to us. I thought it was in very good hands, and it was a project that would probably be managed very well. Taking it through the last public hearing and going through the project again, standing on the bluff a number of times, and thinking through what that would look like, I can't envision this particular project on that place at this time in Sechelt's history. And I look at the planner's report, who ends his recommendation that The better choice in long-term benefits and strategic land use planning would be to deny the application for amendments to the OCP and zoning bylaw, while the better choice in terms of short-term benefits and a compromise would be to give it third reading. And I think we have to take the long term and the better choice and say right project, right time, wrong place. And some reluctance. I don't think I have said such a flat no to any project that's come forward yet. But I certainly do on this one. I listened to the community. I looked the place over. I stood on the bluff and looked and I was swayed by the number of people who are living currently on the Clayton's land who felt so strongly about the traffic changes and what that would mean and how that would mean. I was also struck by the fact that the road bylaw, Cowrie Road going up past the high school is built to a certain standard with sidewalks on both sides. And I know when the Osprey apartments, et cetera, were put in there. And I noted that Cowrie Street on the other side of the Clayton lands is built to a certain standard with sidewalks on both sides. And I know when the Sangara lands were developed for the Silverstone. And here's this section in the middle that has one sidewalk on one side with a small boulevard to a different and a local standard. So clearly the assumption of the developer at the time was that this was going to be all residential. And I take seriously the concerns that were brought forward by the Sangaras, both by their agent and by the Sangaras themselves by letter, that the changing of zoning after an agreed to master plan is the wrong thing to do. So I'm going to vote against this third reading, and I encourage other councillors to consider that as well. Councillor Inkster.
Thank you. When proposals like this come forward that are, in a sense, contrary to the OCP, what you look for is the people close by that will be most affected by the development to see where their support is. In a sense, asking your community if they have deemed that the OCP, in a sense, is a little bit dated and needs to be changed with this one decision in this one area. What we're hearing with this development from those closely and most affected is that they don't support the massing. They don't support the large building in that area. It was pointed out and put forward by somebody who spoke social license. I think that's a fair definition of what I was looking for in order to make a change to the OCP in this area. I have said a number of times that larger buildings belong in the downtown core and on the Sechelt slopes. That is no longer the slope, that's up on top. So you have to then look at those areas for those kinds of buildings. With the one lower down that we've seen that will come forward probably is a better spot for a larger building and the viewscapes that go with it. So based on that and the fact that those around it, and I didn't hear anybody around it, maybe there was one or two in support of it, most of the people were against it for the reasons that have been presented: traffic issues, size, viewscapes, massing. That's why I can't support it. We need to, if we make changes to the OCP in these one-off changes, we in a sense need to see the need for it. It is needed in terms of its use, and we need it in terms of going forward in Sechelt for what our people will need as they age, but it just can't be there. So I'm looking for, as we move forward into our future, that there's proposals for other areas. I have to listen to the people who are most affected. I have to listen to the people in the neighborhood, and I will not be supporting it.
Other council discussion? I see Councillor Seegers.
Thank you. I hear what my fellow councillors say, and I too recognize the need in the community. I have seen that the developer has been responsive to what the community has said. The community came back and said, we didn't want the building as close to the bluff as what was initially proposed. They moved it back. They also said they wanted it moved over so that there was more of a buffer between the building and the Sangara properties, and they did that. So the traffic needs are needs that we're dealing with this whole area up there. I will support it at this point because I think as I said, there is a huge need, and this developer has a good reputation and has been responsive and is willing to work with the community.
And Councillor Wright?
No, thank you, Your Worship. I'm going to support this development. There is an incredible need in this community for this type of facility. I have not walked from downtown to the bluff, but I have walked the bluff several times. Councillor Seegers is right. The developer has moved the building back. In addition to that, he stepped the building so that the second floor is further back than the first floor. And if you stand at the bottom of those properties and you look up at that rock wall, I would venture to say you're not even going to see the building from that cul-de-sac that it sits, that's below it. So while there may be some concerns about the mass of the building, I don't have those same concerns. I hear the argument that this is the right facility, just in the wrong location. But I guess I would say to councillors, yes, I can think of a whole lot of better locations, but the reality is we don't have a developer sitting here with one of those better locations that's willing to do it and put this kind of a facility in this community. When you weigh those things up, the developer, he's got this piece of property and he's willing to put this particular facility in, so I'm going to support it.
Any further discussion? If I can just say two things without prolonging the debate. The developer operator for the project, as with the Spaney project, both said that over 50% of the clientele will come from off coast. So it's not driven entirely by demand on the coast, but it is driven by economic demand on the coast. And I hope that, I think that's enough. It's a tough decision for everyone, so I don't want to prolong it. I think we've heard why we think and how we think about it. Councillor Seegers.
So I'll just make a comment in response to that. I know we've seen over the last number of years, lots of the residents from this community have had to move off coast because there was no place for them here. So when they say 50% will come from off coast, I'm wondering how many of them are just coming home.
If this was a debating club, that would be a very good point. Oh, Councillor Shanks.
A lot of comments been made about it should be downtown, closer to downtown. When you look around, there's very little flat land. And it's basically on the south side of Barnacle. And I see two of those properties have just been sold. And I would expect some sort of multi-housing to go in there as well. So it would be nice if we had a greater area which was in fact level in the downtown area, but unfortunately we don't have that.
We have a lot of level land close to this new Neptune connector that's coming up. It's going to be a straight highway to downtown. Okay, let's call the question in front of us, which is, and just to read it again, it was on top of page 116 of our agenda, that zoning bylaw number 25, 1987, amendment bylaw number 25, 278, Westbrook by the Sea, be given third reading. All those in favor? Any opposed? And that's carried. I would like, as we move to final adoption, to see that project marked out on the site. I know at one time there were helium balloons. I never saw them. I have no idea what they really are, but I would like to see the four corners of the front marked so we could actually see that and remind ourselves of the stepping that Councillor Wright referred to, so that as we move forward, I think there can be some adjustment by the community if we have a chance to digest the direction that Council's going on this. all decisions are good if you have a chance to process them. Moving on to 8.4, which is public hearings and consultation for, oh, sorry. I was opposed to it. Okay, I'm sorry about that. Okay, the bylaw is 147 through to 148. It's bylaw number 25278, 2016 CD 37 Westbrook by the Sea. The full title, a bylaw to amend District of Sechelt zoning bylaw number 25, 1987 by rezoning a portion of District Lot 1385 in the West Sechelt neighborhood from RR1, Rural 1 Zone, to a new Comprehensive Development Zone 37 and PA1, Park Recreation and Assembly 1 Zone, in support of a supportive living and assisted living residential facility and expansion to Clayton Park. And I look for third reading to be moved by Councillor Wright, Councillor Seegers, and Councillor Mueller. First, second, and third. All those in favor? That's carried. Any opposed? And that's still some opposed. That's carried. Thank you. I doubt it. I think we can remember without putting it in the minutes. Moving on to item 8.4, which is public hearings and consultation for zoning bylaw number 25. If we get through this by 9 o'clock, we might take a 3 or 4 minute break. Item 8.4, and first a motion to receive the report that's been prepared by Aaron Thompson, our community planner. Councillor Seegers, thank you for moving that. Seconded by Councillor Wright. All those in favor? Thank you, that's carried, and we move it back to Mr. Thompson.
Thank you, Your Worship. So this is the result of the public hearing for zoning bylaw number 25-268, 2015 CD 36, Rockwood Ocean Stories. Here you can see the location. Here you can see Medusa Street, Cowrie Street, Barnacle Street, and Pilot Way. And just here in the corner, you can see the proposed Neptune connector just up here. Yes. So this is the third public hearing held for this report. There was a previous report that went to council at the April 6, 2016 meeting that analyzed the previous results. So this will be focusing on the comments submitted between the adjournment of the second public hearing and the adjournment of the third public hearing. Sorry, this is the summary of the comments again. A lot of repetition, of course, from the previous presentations, the concerns with the traffic impact study, mainly looking at the there's concerns with the recommendation, the methodology, the timing, and various other aspects without going into them with detail. Again, the desire to see the West Sechelt connector, and that there's enough cyclist and pedestrian access from West Sechelt to the downtown. There is, of course, also concern over the proposed location and how it is not central enough, that the existing infrastructure is not adequate for the development, that the current vehicle safety in the area is already an issue and could worsen. There is access issues with for people with mobility issues, recommendation for reduced street design, concern over connecting Medusa Street to Pilot Way, and to see that the proposed connector from West Sechelt is done prior to the connection through Cowrie and Derby. Yes, and then of course the desire to see traffic controls at the Shorncliffe and Highway 101 intersection. Again, quite similar to the previous analysis. Again, the traffic impact study provided the recommendations to mitigate the traffic impacts of the proposed development. This proposal, along with the Westbrook, are the two biggest contributors to this. So it is quite crucial that the completed design and everything is done prior to adoption of the bylaw, and then that those requirements are secured. Moving on to the recommendations, again, that the minutes be received and adopted, that council confirms that consultation has been completed, and that prior to the adoption of the zoning bylaw, that these servicing requirements are secured. And then finally, that the zoning bylaw is given third reading. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and I'll look to council if there's any questions or clarifications of the report. Having worn ourselves out on Westbrook, I'll look for somebody to move recommendations 2 and 3, that the minutes will be adopted and the consultation is complete. Thank you, Councillor Seegers and Councillor Lutz. All those in favor? That's carried. Any opposed? And that somebody to move the 4th recommendation, that prior to adoption, we secure the servicing requirements are identified and secured based on traffic generated. Councillor Seegers, Councillor Lutz, thank you. Any discussion of that? All those in favor? That's carried. And the final recommendation then, moving to a motion that the zoning bylaw be given third reading. Councillor Wright makes that and Councillor Lutz seconds it. Any discussion? All those in favor? That's carried. Moving then to the bylaw itself. Bylaw number 25268, 2015, CD 36, Rockwood Ocean Stories. Full title, a bylaw to amend District of Sechelt zoning bylaw number 25, 1987 by rezoning a property in the downtown center neighborhood from the dual zoning of R1, a single-family residential zone, and R4, a multifamily residential zone, to a new comprehensive development zone 36 in support of a 4-part multifamily residential and supported or assisted housing development. And I'd look for somebody to move third reading. Councillor Lutz and Councillor Shanks. Discussion at third reading, because we haven't seen this for a while. No, we actually only rescinded third this time. It's on page 175. I would just like to say this was also a deep compromise, and the height in particular is of concern. And it's one that I think if it came forward under the current planning department protocols and the current council's analysis in 2017 compared to when it first came in 2015, there might be a slightly different adjustment and push on the height. But my sense is this is a compromise that we made then and I can still live with. But it was a difficult one, but it's one I can live with compared to the previous one, which I very definitely had changed my views on. Councillor Mueller.
Yeah, I just wanted to reiterate some of the concerns I raised previously. During this one, it's been some time since we last dealt with this. Was about the height of the project and the way that the the height was measured, and as well the impacts to Rockwood, which I felt were significant. What I wanted to say at this juncture is that in our OCP, the height and the way that the height is dealt with, there are only specific instances where a building of this height would ever be even entertained. And I can't think of another area in Sechelt where I would entertain a building of this height. So I just wanted to say that this is not the height of buildings in Sechelt going forward, not in my opinion. And this is a one-off, and the OCP amendment to reflect that is due to the need, which is the need for seniors housing. And that's what has influenced my vote. I do see the gray tsunami as being one of the big things that we're gonna have to deal with in this town. We know the demographics, and so all the other things measured, I have to support not only this project, but the previous one on that basis entirely.
Thank you for those comments. And yeah, we'll have to get used to how we assess natural grade and on sloping lots and what they mean. Any other comments on third reading? If not, I'll just call the vote. All those in favor of third reading? Any opposed? And that's carried. Which brings us to item 8.4. You okay? You don't need a break? You're okay? Good, okay. Item 8.5, Oracle Properties Housing Agreement, bylaw number 560. And first, a motion to receive the report from our municipal planner, Councillor Seegers, Councillor Lutz. All those in favor? And Ms. Lutton, thank you for your patience.
Yes, I just wanted to refresh council's memory and the members of the public that on August 2nd, council gave the Oracle Properties Housing Agreement 3 readings, and it would be now in order to consider the 4th reading. And just to give council an update, the developer is, I think, anxious to get going, so there will be, I think, finally 2 affordable housing units constructed in Sechelt. So we hope that will be fulfilled in the near future.
Thank you very much. Someone to move the motion, which is that this be adopted. Councillor Seegers, Councillor Inkster. All those in favor? That's carried. And then moving to the bylaw itself, item 8.5. Motion to, I'll read out the title. Oracle Properties Housing Agreement, bylaw number 560-2017. Full title, a bylaw to enter into a housing agreement under section 483 of the Local Government Act, and for adoption is moved tonight by Councillor Seegers and seconded by Councillor Lutz. All those in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. Thank you for that work. Item 8.6, which is the District of Sechelt Biosolids Disposal Fees Amendment. First, a motion to receive the report. Councillor Wright and Councillor Lutz. All those in favor? And we'll turn very quickly to the corporate officer to speak to one-page report.
Thank you, Your Worship. As noted in my report, bylaw number 483-1 2017 was given 3 readings by council at its August 2nd regular meeting. It would now be in order to consider adoption of the bylaw. Once adopted, this amendment bylaw will remove a holding tank sewage disposal fee requirement from the parent bylaw number 483-2009. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And adoption is moved by Councillor Lutz, Councillor Wright. All those in favor? Adoption? Don't usually.
We did for second and third reading.
We read and we discussed it. Councillor Seegers would like to speak to adoption.
Thank you. We discussed this and voted on first, second, and third reading when it was brought before us on August 2nd. Since then, we've had community members who've gone out and looked at other communities around this. And I'd like to actually turn this back to staff to have them look at it again. And I'll give you some examples. So if we use some actual numbers, we could speculate that a home could generate 12 cubic meters per month, or 1 truckload of raw sewage, whether it comes through pipes or in a holding tank. So we're looking to charge $44 per cubic meter, or $528 per month, $6,336 per year for pumping out a holding tank of a home, yet we charge $371 per year per house as a user fee for the same sewage to come through the pipe. So it begs the question, what's the actual cost we're looking to recover? If we're only charging a homeowner $371 per year, but charging a home with a holding tank $6,336 per year, either one is way too low or one's way too high. So the actual is probably closer to the lower amount. And we haven't actually seen a business case to support this massive increase. I'll give you another example. Our Davis Bay washroom in the summer needs to be pumped out almost weekly. If it costs us $528 per week over 52 weeks, admittedly we don't do it every week then, but that would equal $27,456 per year. So would that then be added to our parks budget and transferred to the sewer operating fund? So one of the arguments that staff brought forward is that it's hard to distinguish between trucks bringing and dumping raw sewage, which is holding tanks, versus septage, as from a porta potty. Raw sewage contains water from showers, washing clothes, etc. So additional liquid is not included, and that's not included when we're talking septage. So one of our local residents investigated and found that the Regional District of Nanaimo distinguishes between holding tanks and septage and charges them differently. They have around 200 houses using holding tanks. If we were to have the same number of holding tanks as they do and charges we are looking to adopt this evening, the amount collected for the year would be around 1.2 million, which would cover almost all our whole operating budget for the sewer treatment plant for the year. So at this point, I'm speaking against this, and I'd actually like to see this put on hold and have our engineering department reach out to the Regional District of Nanaimo, find out what system they're using to make this distinction. How are they managing to distinguish between the two? As a council, we continually say we want a fair and equitable process. This change does not seem fair and equitable to me. We are penalizing the users of holding tanks, us included, District of Sechelt, by making this change to our user rates when there may be another solution.
Thank you for that information. Did I also hear a motion to defer? And is it seconded? Seconded by Councillor Shanks. No discussion or debate on a motion to defer. All those in favor? I'll just look for the count again. All those in favor of deferral, which would refer it back to staff and then back to us prior to adoption. Okay, I'll vote in favor of that, so that's carried. And any opposed, just for the record? Okay. And we'll send that to staff. We'll let staff come back with another report and look at the numbers again. I've also read the information in Nanaimo. It's not a report, but we could at least ask them what they did. I would suspect it's political, if it's 200 homes. We have to know that holding tanks are usually only put in places where there's environmental sensitivity and they should not be built and used. And so they're concessions made at the time of development for projects that should not go forward, but are allowed to under certain circumstances. Usually proximity to streams or water courses, or like Davis Bay, proximity to the foreshore. Yeah, Councillor Mueller, question on, so we've dealt with the issue, it's deferred, but further discussion, Councillor
Yeah,
Mueller.
it was just a question on the motion to defer now that it has been passed. This is a question for our Director of Financial Services. Does that affect in any way the financial plan for this year?
Your Worship, no, it doesn't. We had factored in the original rates for the year.
Yep. Yeah, we have lots of time to deal with it in terms of our budgets. Okay. Thank you for bringing that forward and for raising the concerns. Moving on to new business. 9.1, appointment of council members to Planning and Community Development Committee. One of the few things under the community charter that the mayor can do is appoint the standing committees. And I've used them since the election of 2014 because I think it's a far more democratic and flexible way to have decisions come through where more people get a chance to discuss and develop than a committee of the whole, which is sometimes unwieldy. And I don't want to change the membership of the Planning and Community Development Committee. It remains the members of Councillor Seegers, Councillor Lutz, Councillor Shanks, and Councillor Mueller, but I'd like to change the appointment of the chair and the vice chair. And for the remainder of our term, Councillor Mueller will be the chair of the Planning Committee, and Councillor Shanks will be stepped back to the vice chair. And I just want to thank Councillor Shanks for his service over the last 3 years. When we were elected in 2014, those with experience, especially long experience, were very welcome to my new arrival back because it takes a while to get used to how things are going. And I was glad to have all of the experienced councillors, Councillor Shanks, Lutz, Seegers, and Councillor Inkster on the council. It's quite useful that Councillor Shanks in particular stepped into the chair of planning when we didn't have a lot of people with experience on that. So foregoing, thank you very much, Councillor Shanks, and Councillor Mueller. We look forward to your term as chair.
Planning meeting when I didn't show up on time. This isn't a reprimand, okay?
Councillor Shanks has been a bit more distracted in the last while, but we're not sure why. Okay, business items number 10, request for decision, appointment of an external auditor. Let me get the right paper here. First, if we can receive the report from the manager of the financial services. Thank you, Councillor Seegers and Councillor Lutz. All those in favor? And if we could ask the Director of Corporate and Financial Services to speak on behalf of his manager.
Thank you, Your Worship. So yes, the audit services contract with BDO, it actually expired in 2015. We kept them on for one more year for 2016, just with the turnover in staff. So it was now appropriate to do a full RFP for a 5-year audit services contract. And through that process and through the committee, staff is recommending that MMP LLP be appointed auditors, external auditors for the district for the fiscal years 2017 to 2021. And I would like to point out that based on the RFP, we're saving almost $29,000 per year on audit services with this new contract.
Thank you very much. When I see those kind of savings and a 5-year commitment, which will barely raise the fees from $26,250 to the end of the 5 years, it'll be $28,750. I'm worried about change orders and where the difference in that $29,000 can come from two equally professional corporate auditors.
Your Worship, sometimes it can depend on how much time they feel the need to be on site versus and who they send on site. Secondly, and I wouldn't turn someone away for doing this, but they may want to try to get a foothold on the Sunshine Coast, and this may be their way of getting in, hopefully to get a good reference from us and move forward. So if they're wanting to cut their costs to get our business, we'll take it.
Okay, no, it's a great, thank you. Councillor Seegers?
Thank you. I also note you make a point in here to say that there have been some efficiencies and improvements implemented in the accounting department over the last year, and that has also contributed to that. So I want to thank you for that.
Any other comments? Then we'll look for the motion that the accounting firm MNP LLP be appointed as the district's external auditor for the fiscal years 2017 to 2021 inclusive. Councillors Wright and Seegers, all those in favor? That's carried. I hope our former auditors sharpen their pencil. Might be a good lesson. Moving on to item 10.2, request for a decision on the RX drug mark IDE sign bylaw. First, the motion, the report from the municipal planner be received. Thank you, Councillors Seegers and Councillor Wright. All those in favor? Any opposed? And we'll turn it back to the municipal planner, Ms. Letman.
Okay, to give Mayor and Council and members of the public some background, on July 5th, Council considered the sign variance and approved a majority of the signs except for sign number 1. And they also directed that staff work with the applicant on window sign number 7. The RX Drug Mart IDA has come back with an application. And if you go to page 212, Sarah, I'm hoping you can scroll down to 212. Oh, thank you. This is what the Rexall's drugstore previously looked like, previous tenant. And the revised RX Drug Mart sign is on page 213. So if we can scroll down. Will be kind of in that location. It's slightly bigger than that banner, but it's located on the next page. Unfortunately, you have to look at it sideways. The original Drug Mart sign area was 22.5 square meters, approximately 15 meters in length. So it's been reduced down to an area of 10.18 meters squared with an approximate length of 12.4 meters, and that includes the RX logo. The character height has been reduced from 0.91 meters to 0.72 meters. And the logo height, the radius of the RX, has been reduced from 2.03 meters to 1.8 meters. Then, in terms of the window signage for window sign number 7, it's on page 214. Connie, if you can scroll down to the next one. So the with Rexall, we had this kind of imagery that had some slogans on it, but it was very photo. There was no products being advertised, and the original Rexall development of their signage was with kind of sayings like RX Drug Mart, IDA, Atomo, which is their product line. So we encouraged them, and they've come back with the new signage is just below that one on that same page. The proposal is just strictly some photo lifestyle imagery. So at the pedestrian level, this will, I think, fit within the community much better. And so the staff are recommending that the changes be put forward. You'll find the proposed development variance permit is located on page 215 to page 222 for council's consideration.
Thank you very much. Any clarifications needed of those items?
Oh, there is
Yes.
one thing I forgot. One of the additional items I've added to the variance is consideration that they would turn off their wall signage lighting in the off-store hours. So that was one of the comments from neighboring property owners was the lighting and dark sky lighting. RX Drug Mart had proposed that they could be working with the service provider on that, and we have made it a condition of the variance.
And the wall lighting is the landscape?
It's wall sign number 1, 2, 3,
okay.
4A, 4B. Those are backlit signs.
Okay, and they're on the corner of the building. Okay, anyone, if there are no further questions of Ms. Lettman, I'll look for somebody to move the second recommendation. Councillor Inkster, Councillor Seegers, seconded. Any discussion? Councillor Inkster.
Thank you. I'm glad that staff was able to talk to the people proposing this and come up with a plan. It'd be interesting to see what it looks like. I guess it's going to be timered. That would be tough to have it on a switch that somebody's got to remember to shut off the switch. So I'm assuming it's going to be timered. What I'm also interested in how it's going to look after it's shut off. Like I'm hoping it will be designed so that it gives some sort of indication to those passing by afterwards that there is that drugstore there. So maybe it's a translucent sign that glows or something like that, but doesn't have the light. I'm not designing the sign. I'm just wondering how it will look in terms of what we're trying to accomplish here.
If the lights are turned off, the lights are off.
Well, okay, there is some technology that you can utilize that makes it be seen still, though. That's all I'm asking about. But I'm glad they came up with a way to deal with the concerns of the neighboring residents that have been concerned since Shoppers came a number of years ago. Kind of reminds me of the Seinfeld episode with Kenny Rogers' Chicken, but I know that the mayor will go, what are you talking about, Seinfeld? But it just reminds me of that, if anybody knows. So I'm glad they've dealt with that bright light that people are concerned about.
Maybe they can build it out of glow-in-the-dark material. So then we'll wonder. Any further discussion? Councillor Mueller.
Yes, thank you. I'm always, a little bit perplexed when we have a large national chain like this come to beautiful little coastal community like Sechelt, and essentially not try to fit in any way. This sign comes back to us. There is no border around the sign. It's on the billboard, so there's no delineation between the sign that's in this and the sign that we hear has been approved by development permit. To me, that's a sign. It is one sign, and it is the entire size of that billboard because it has not been delineated in any way from the corporate branding. I know myself, if I was in charge of these business decisions, I would definitely be trying to fit in with this town because I know that it affects people's shopping habits. Anyways, that's besides the point. I won't be supporting this. I want to see delineation in that sign. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And for what it's worth, I did have a chance to briefly meet one of the individuals involved in the corporate structure, and they are a large aggregate of independent drug associates who very much, by their values, want to fit into the community. So I'm sure they're listening and will do what they can over the next while. I don't know if it's possible when I look at those two pictures that are going to be on the wall and the windows, and I don't know the cost of those, but if they were Sunshine Coast pictures, it would be even better than the generic ones taken out of the stock. The first one looks like it could be on Mount Daniel as easily as not, and certainly something on the edge of Davis Bay Pier or the local piers would get us the second picture, but no. But otherwise, that's all my comment. Councillor Inkster.
I'm wondering if these are just ideas because they're lifestyle questions, but I'm sure that there's people that do signs that are listening that probably could have access to local imagery that's available to, I mean, it's the coast lifestyle. They could do that. You're right. I mean, they could do these images with local stuff. The Soccer Association has some beautiful pictures as an example. So just throwing it out there.
Yep. Okay, the motion in front of us that council approves development variance permit number 21703 for the variance to sign bylaw number 466 and the variance for directory signs 5 and 6 be limited to the life of their respective existing directory signage structures and the lighting of the wall signs be limited to the store's open hours. Any further discussion? Councillor Lutz.
I too am going to vote against this. It's upsetting that these large companies keep coming and dictating to us what our community will look like when the community has already told us what they want it to look like. This is the second time we've done signs for this building in less than 3 years. They don't get a whole lot smaller, and I'm getting fed up with it. I know we need to work on our sign bylaw, but I don't think we should keep amending it. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Councillor Seegers, please.
Thank you. I'd like to acknowledge that, you know, we did push back as a planning committee. We pushed back against the owner of the business, and the owner went away and took what we said under consideration and came back with a smaller sign and is also looking to address the lights that the neighbors, it was their main concern. So they're looking at addressing that by putting the lights on a timer. So I think they've been responsive to our community. It is a sign that is quite a ways from the highway where people drive by, so they do need to have a presence. So I think they've been responsive to our small community.
Thank you, and Councillor Inkster.
Yeah, it's good to hear, as we know, that they have been talking to us a number of times, and I think council just needs to be reminded that this isn't this is a change of corporate ownership and identity each time. That's why they keep coming to us, and you know, you almost jokingly could say the sign should change, should be able to change, because that's what's been happening. But and that's why they kept coming to us. I mean, try being the employees. I mean, who don't know what's happening each time. It's you know, look at it from their viewpoint too. They don't know, and that's what this is. This is a change of ownership forced by the Competition Bureau of Canada. So that's why it's coming to us. And We've approved it before. This looks cleaner to me than the previous signs that I've seen. The other ones are busy. This looks much cleaner.
Thank you, and I'd remind councillors that the landlord suggests that this is a structural part of the building, then the sign is in fact laid on top of a structural architectural piece. So it's a piece of architectural interest that could be blank, but in fact they have the sign RX Drug Mark IDA in the middle of that structural. That's their suggestion. Okay, any further discussion? I didn't realize this had been difficult at planning. I thought it had gone through planning. So I'm cognizant of the fact that the new planning chair is voting against it, and I'm taking that into consideration as well. All those in favor? Any opposed? That's carried this time. Thank you for that discussion and for our concern about the signs, and I'm sure the comments about community involvement are noted. Item 11, reports from councillors. It's been a full month since we've been together as a council, so 11.2, if I can start on my left at Councillor Inkster's and work across, then come back to Councillor Inkster for the SCRD report. We'll start, Councillor Inkster, councillors' reports.
Yeah, thank you. It's, you know, not a lot of meetings. Well, actually, we had a few meetings in August, which is new. We haven't seen that in a while, but other than those meetings that have been referenced, a couple of committee meetings and public hearing, the big busy one. It was a good month of August again that a number of us went to the Writers' Fest, the Festival of the Rolling Arts, and the Show and Shine, and it's a long night, I'll leave it at that, but it's been beautiful weather, but I don't know if council noticed, today up in the sky and near us there was something strange that came down for a whole 3 minutes. Now it's gone away, so I did see some rain, and hopefully we see some again soon. Thank you.
Didn't see it, but then who has seen the rain?
Oh.
Councillor Wright. He's old enough to at least know the song I quoted. Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Worship. It's been a little bit like summer vacation, you know, when you get out of school and don't have any meetings to attend. But however, as I look back through my calendar, I find out that I had to go to Finance Committee, and I also went to the opening of an art exhibition at the Art Center. I went to an anniversary celebration with the Chamber of Commerce. I went to a BC Housing open house for the homeless shelter, Planning Committee meeting, Integrated Community Sustainability Planning meeting, attended the Labor Day picnic. And I had the pleasure of doing the corn roast this year, again, for the Coasters Cart Club. And we served up 36 dozen cobs of corn. And that's a baker's dozen, not just a regular 12. And so that was a good afternoon. And then I worked the streets at the show on the Saturday. And I guess I would be remiss if I didn't say something about one of our other councillors at this table. The car show and that whole weekend wouldn't happen without Councillor Shanks. And I know that he's very modest, and I know that he will tell you that he had all kinds of help and all of this sort of thing, and that's true. But somebody pulled all the strings and did all the planning, and that was Councillor Shanks. So my congratulations to him, because he did a great job. Also during that, thank you to I appreciate that, because he did a lot of work. Nobody knows what goes on behind that. There are some letters that have come in from people who said this is the best run function they've been to. In addition to that, I had my daughter down here for 7 or 8 days with 3 grandchildren. And I had to torch down a roof on my wife's Japanese tea house. And then in all of that, I managed to get down to Pier 17 for coffee for a few times. So it was a good time. I enjoyed it. Thank you. That concludes my report, Your Worship.
Thank you for that. And Councillor Seegers, what did you do on your summer holidays?
Holidays? I want to acknowledge Councillor Shanks as well. I remember a couple of years ago when there was some concern about the Rod Run and the car show, and how he was a bit hesitant initially to step in, but he took the reins. So yes, the applause was well deserved. And it's just gotten bigger every year. So congratulations on that.
That's why we're expanding Cowrie Street.
So other events, I look back, I thought it was just a couple of weeks and not much had happened, but it's been a month. So the Sechelt Chamber's 70th birthday, the BC Housing Public Info Meeting, and I wanted to mention, I don't believe it's out yet, I think you'll hear about it this weekend. There is another meeting being put on by BC Housing on Monday night, September 11th, from 5:30 to 7:30 at the Sechelt Indian Band Hall, and I think you'll find the format will be quite a bit different than the last one.
Attention alert, they've actually canceled that.
Oh, have
Sorry.
they? Today? Thank you. Okay, so a library board meeting and a meeting regarding marketing for the library fundraising. I attended the Hackett Park Arts and Craft Fair. We all attended the 4 public hearings, and I had the opportunity to sit in on the Integrated Community Sustainability Plan meeting for a short time with Councillor Wright and Councillor Mueller. So I'm looking forward to actually some time off. Thanks.
Thank you very much for that report, and I'll come back to the BC Housing in a minute. Councillor Mueller.
Yes, thank you. I guess, as you all know, the biggest thing that would have happened to me over the summer regarding council is being appointed chair to the Planning Community Development Committee. I'm sure some of you watched kind of curiously as I was thrown into that position. Normally, I would prepare to be chair in a little bit different way than I prepare to be a councillor. So I look forward to bringing that with me as chair in the future. I just wanted to say that one of my number one passions around the council table is planning, and I've often said, and I really believe it, that Sechelt deserves the very best in planning. And I think that with a setting like this, the only thing we can do is mess it up through bad planning. With that in mind, I will be very much bringing that to the chair. In terms of meetings, I got a chance to sit in as the alternate liaison for the IACSP Advisory Committee, and I just wanted to again relay to the community how important that project is for this council. It's one of the key tangible outcomes of our strategic plan, and I think that deserves a lot of focus for this council, and not only that, but for the community as well in the coming months. Other than that, I, like the rest of council, have been trying to wrap my head around the traffic changes that will be coming for this local area as a result of some of the developments that we've been discussing recently. I know this council takes a lot of heat for perhaps not rushing through projects as some people in the community feel that we should, but when you have a look at some of the things that came out of just a simple traffic study relating to certain neighborhoods, you see why we do that extra level of due diligence, and I really don't feel it can be rushed. I think you have to do it well, because communities in the future cannot change. Once they get established patterns, we really need to do it right the first time. And so, as my partner will tell you, I spent a lot of nights pacing back and forth, trying to really wrestle with what is at the heart of each one of these. And this particular, we had 4 come at once. And so I found that it took a lot of thinking to go through that. That's my report.
Thank you. That was a difficult, long weekend. Councillor Lutz.
Thank you. I too attended committee meetings and Sechelt Hospital finance meeting, public hearings, but I had some fun. We had our Labor Day picnic and somewhere between 600 and 800 people. It was a little less this year, and I think it was because of the heat. But everybody had a really good time. I seem to have had a very busy artistic month, me who's not very artistic. The Arts and Crafts Show, the local art show, the Writers' Festival, and just yesterday with my 3 sisters, I attended or went on a excursion to the big city, and we went to Vancouver Art Gallery to the Monet exhibit. And I really recommend that before it's finished, which is October 3rd. If you have the chance, go and see it. So it's been a pretty interesting month. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Councillor Shanks.
First of all, I'd like to thank my fellow councillors for throwing some praise at me for organizing the car show. Once you've done it once, it's like riding a bicycle, but it just involves more people, sometimes a tandem bicycle, for instance. But, you know, it was a good show. There were issues. We're going to try and address the issues, specifically traffic that has to come off of Toreto into Clayton's here. We're going to have a get-together with some of the interested party, including Clayton's and the RCMP and 2 or 3 other groups as well, sometime in the future. But the upside of this whole thing was in our 50-50 draws that we have 4 draws over the Friday and Saturday, plus the Sea Cavalcade down in Gibson's. We generated approximately $5,500 that will go back into the community, and it's earmarked for the food banks on the Sunshine Coast, as well as the Hospital Foundation. So this is a club that did not start out as a service club, but they become a service club. And on an annual basis, they give out anywhere from $5,000 to $10,000 a year. So that's a good thing, but it has its issues. Anybody wondering why I look perhaps a little bit thinner was asked if my health is failing, and I said, no, not really, but just try driving an ice truck during the month of July and August and delivering to the entire Sunshine Coast. And you may not lose 12 to 14 pounds like I have, because I normally only lose 8 to 10. But it will get put back on. So I've been your Iceman and a very busy person over the last couple of months. Just a final comment. A couple of months ago, July 5th, regular council meeting, I did mention that council was taking a real hiding in terms of what was being published in the media over a variety of issues. And even today, there's yet another issue. So I would like us to be able to come together at some time in the next couple of weeks so that we can make some corrections in terms of council's position, because council is the one who are taking the flak for what's appearing in the paper. And I'd just like to give the general public council's perspective on 3 or 4 of those different issues, so they at least have some clarity in terms of where this council's been coming from.
Thank you for that, and we'll look to staff to see what kind of a budget we can have on communications. And that leads me to one of the things I was going to mention in my report. Yes, it was a great month for social and cultural and activities. It seemed there was more than usual. But in terms of formal meetings, we did meet with Paravel and Taylor, or I did, on a day that they were in here to the district. And one of the issues was to talk about communications and particular reputational management and how we can better communicate the perspective that council and staff have of the work that's being done here. As Councillor Mueller mentioned in his report, we don't rush things, but we don't mess things up and try not to. And it's a complex role. It's not often understood. Also spoke with Lower Mainland Detachment E on integrated teams. They're doing a survey on how local governments pay for and support that. I wanted to mention a small event here in the library for Ann Watson, who's been the archivist now for 20 years. And that's been a great support. And if there's one missing area of our cultural infrastructure, it's the fact that we don't have a standalone archives for community archives for the entire history, the Helen Dawes collection, the things that actually keep track of where we've been over the last 70 years as a community. We really need that more than we need an art gallery or a performing arts or almost anything else. And Anne has been holding that together for us now for 20 years. And I'd like to mention a couple of meetings I had on the homeless shelter issue. First, I did meet with Rain City, so I could get a better sense of their perspective. The CAO and I met with BC Housing, and that's where we learned they had canceled their September 11th meeting, and they are tentatively rescheduling it for October in the first week when we're back from UBCM, but that may change again, so I won't announce any dates. I've also, the shelter issue is very complex and very important to us to get right if we're going to be compassionate. And I also spent some time at the current shelter, so I could ask the current clients and users what they thought of a different site and the use that they have and their role in the community and where they sit. I think in a democracy, we have to try and expand our set of voices. And I'll also be meeting with some of the neighbors and residents on ebb tide, again, to try and incorporate. The way I work best is to incorporate and understand the people I represent so I can represent their voices. And then when there's contradictions and differences, try and resolve those with a full respect for what their positions are. So that's an issue that's taking a fair amount of interest and time, but it's because it's really important to us. Moving back then to our, and I'm going to speak about that again when we get to the correspondence, but SCRD report, Councillor Inkster.
Thank you. I'm glad that Councillor Shanks reminded us of what he's referred to a number of times before, and that we get together soon and talk about some of the ways that we can put our story out there, because as everyone needs to remember, every story has two sides, and that in fact the community elected a council that's different, experienced, and thoughtful. And nary is an obstructionist in the lot, so I'm hoping we can talk about some of the things that concern the community and get our story out there. In terms of the regional district, the tomorrow there is no meeting, but next week there is the beginning of what may become a busy September leading up to UBCM. And next Thursday, the big meeting is the hospital board meeting, in which we talk about the budget and some requests that I alluded to before from how some construction costs will be picked up, whether it be by Vancouver Coastal or the local taxpayers. So that will be a discussion, and I pretty much know where many of the board members are, and you know, we're not looking as much as they would hope towards the local taxpayer all the time. So that's kind of where it will start. So that begins next week and continues to the end of the month with a number of more meetings. Thanks.
Thank you for that report. Moving on then, we have 12.1, request for decision. There's no closed meeting release items to be released, or are there? What are there?
One, just one.
Where is it? Okay, no, that's correspondence. 223. That's the one I was writing my notes on. Somebody to move the recommendation that the report from the corporate officer dated August 14th, 2017 regarding release of a resolution from August 2nd, 2017 closed meeting be received. Further, that the following resolution be confirmed in an open meeting, that Municipal Planner Angela Letman be appointed as the District of Sechelt's Deputy Approving Officer. Thank you, Councillor Seegers. Councillor Shanks, all those in favor? And we have a formal new Deputy Approving Officer. Sechelt visitor statistics, motion to receive. Thank you, Councillor Seegers, Councillor Lutz. Any comments on those this evening? And a motion to receive the RCMP statistics for July 2017. Councillor Wright and Councillor Lutz had their hands up early. All those in favor of receipt? And any comments on those statistics? Big percentage change in crimes against persons, but decline in Gibson's and ours was modest, but And moving then to council correspondence for receipt. Thank you, Councillor Seegers, Councillor Mueller. All those in favor of receipt? Thank you. And any of that people would like to pull out for attention or response? While people are looking at that, I'll just move us to item 5 for just a moment. We received a great number of letters and emails on the shelter and the fact that it needs to be relocated from the St. Hilda's site. Both letters of concern and fear from people who may find the new shelter in their neighborhood, and then a slurry of letters that came in response to some signs that were placed down by the proposed site, asking people what they would think if this was a homeless shelter and if they would feel their children were safe and secure. And that got quite a response on Facebook, most of which was then parlayed through to us, either in emails and others. And I just want to say that it revealed our community, as these things always do, and not in a fairly positive way, but in, again, a reminder of how difficult it is for this community to remain civil and respectful on all sides. And I won't go into length, but I wrote down a whole page here of nasty comments that came through to council correspondence on this issue, from those that are calling other people heartless and criminal and callous to disgusting and abhorrent and cruel and insensitive people who lack all compassion or empathy, hateful, utterly hateful, disgraceful. A couple of comments that called others subhuman. And this didn't come from residents who were being accused of being NIMBYs. They were not positive in their comments about a shelter coming into their neighborhood. They said things that were certainly fearful and of concern we want to work through. But I was struck by the number of people who would write in support of the shelter, and the first 2 lines would be of the importance of compassion and care for the most vulnerable, and the second and third lines would be using the language that I've just used about disgusting and hateful and calling the residents subhuman for having concerns. So the lack of respect and validity on all sides, both of those who need to respect that being without housing is not a crime, and that, as one person said, every home is a homeless shelter. We should remind ourselves of that. Every home is a homeless shelter. And in one of the documents that I was looking through, and actually it came from Dwell magazine, and for those of you who know Dwell, you know that an issue has become mainstream when homelessness is in Dwell. And in the city of Portland and in this report, they talk about housing, not homelessness. Because many of the people I met when I went to the shelter live in Sechelt. They have homes. They don't have housing. So it's about a lack of housing, not a lack of a home. And we may want to rephrase that so we talk about housing shortages and housing people without housing as opposed to those without homes. But I just want to say this community needs to really work on respecting the legitimate views of other people with some compassion, even when you disagree with them. And we're a long ways from doing that. We're a long ways from doing that. And what we saw in this correspondence, 100 some odd pages of it that I went through yesterday and today, is not compassionate or caring or even giving respectful legitimacy to people who have concerns and different views. The ageism, one person wrote in and said those signs must have been done by an old person because I assume that old people have too much time on their hands. It just didn't stop. And what really struck me was those who didn't seem to know the contradictions between their compassion for the homeless in the abstract. And I say in the abstract because not one single person who wrote in support of the homeless and said we need to have them said, and I have a site in my neighborhood. Every single one of them said, the site you're proposing in their neighborhood is really good. Not one of them said, I have a site in my neighborhood. Will you come here and look at these 2 empty lots? Would you consider doing this? We're right on a bus route. So we really need to work on being respectful and caring about the other views, even when we disagree. I think we modeled that pretty well at this table. We had some strong differences on this table. you know, but I don't see us falling down very often, if at all, to real disrespect or the kind of things you see. So please try and remember when you're talking to other members of the community that they deserve to be heard and respected at some level. Any other correspondence that we need to pull out? With that, I'll look for a motion to adjourn. Thank you, Councillor Seegers and Councillor Wright. All those in favor? This meeting is adjourned at 20 to 10. A few comments from the community if you have time, and then we'll try and move through. Pam?